how a day-to-day looks like for you as a fellow engineer at Kotak Bank.
All over the place right now. I know that's probably not the thing you want to be talking about in a developer productivity podcast, but it's a mix of setting the direction, identifying problems, making time for coding as a fellow is harder than it was.
What does developer productivity mean for you?
It is not about how much activity you perform, it is how much outcomes you bring to the table. It is okay to slog. You slog during a crisis. If you're sitting at 11 p.m., you know what? I'm going to solve this additional ticket. I'm going to add this new feature. That to me is useless.
How many bugs you have solved?
Exactly, right? A lot of times we focus on speed, we don't focus on direction. Engineering at the end of the day is all about trade-offs. You cannot build a perfect system given the cost and time constraints that you have. Engineers are typically paid disproportionately to the rest of the organization. How do you measure that value continuously, right? And how do you show that to the board, right? Or to leadership?
It's not necessary that you have a 90-hour work week in the system.
Absolutely not.
Hello everyone, welcome to episode 5 of TechKeys by Mercari, where we unlock insight from leaders in the tech industry. Well, in any organization, engineering and developers or software developers constitutes the majority part of it, and it's equally important for them to be productive. In this episode, Beyond the Commit, cracking the code of developer productivity, we'll discuss different stages of what a developer needs to go through. It's not only the code that needs to be committed, it's a lot more than that. We'll talk about how a developer can be more productive, for you to tackle the cases of not just the OKRs, but different wages of it. We'll talk a lot about it with our special guest for the day, Vijay Daniel, a fellow engineer from Kotak Bank, along with us to discuss the entire route on how this happens. Welcome to the episode, Vijay. Thanks a lot for taking out time and discussing all these things with us.
Hey, Weber, super awesome to be here. Super excited to be part of this.
So, before we get into all the nitty-gritties of how developer productivity and stuff is like, right? I would like to understand how a day-to-day looks like for you as a fellow engineer at Kotak Bank.
So, it's a bit all over the place right now. I know that's probably not the thing you want to be talking about in a developer productivity podcast, but but reality is reality, right? So it's a mix of setting the direction, identifying problems, reviewing the direction that the team is already on, making sure we are hitting the right things, coding a lot, which I like. Making time for coding as a fellow is honestly harder than it was maybe earlier in my career, but it's
Spare
important.
time from meetings that you have.
Meetings, design reviews, and all of that. I still like to code a lot, so that's one of the things I try to take out time for and make sure it gets done. Code reviews, feedback, mentoring. So this is how a typical week looks like, right? Where I do a lot of these activities to ensure that the team, the org, the company stays on track for the business outcomes that we are trying to achieve.
That's awesome. That I can understand it be super busy. And you were telling me that you have three good childs across it, so you have to manage the work life that goes around.
I think that was a tough transition, to be honest, right? I mean, right out of college, when you have all the time in the world to go slog, spend a lot of time for work, right? Then marriage happens, then kids happen, more kids happen, right? How do you kind of navigate that and still be successful at work, right? Because lot of time spent at work does not is not, I mean, the time you spend at work is not proportional to the success that you have at work.
Okay.
So it's also about how
So
you
what
pick
you're
up the things
saying
that
is
matter.
it's not necessary that you have a 90-hour work week in the system.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Absolutely not. It's definitely fun to talk about, I mean, to say things like that for folks, but
Okay.
I don't think it is practical or sustainable, right? We're not looking to build castles on sweat and blood, right? Again and again and again, right?
Yeah.
So I think my personal take on that is it is okay to slog,
Okay.
right? I think it is. It's a function of this. At least this is my personal framework for this. You slog during a crisis. right? Let's say the company is in crisis, or your team is under crisis, or your system is under crisis.
Yeah.
At that time, all holes, remove all the barriers, just go do what it takes to bring it back on track.
Makes sense.
You slog to innovate and create outsized impact. Let's say you have something that you do as part of your regular job, but you know what? You have this crazy idea that you think like will deliver disproportionate outcomes for your business, and you want to try it out, show a POC, right? Bring people on board. At that time, I think it's okay to slog. It's okay to slog, to innovate, or to show outsized impact.
Basically,
right?
anything that adds value to you as a person as well.
And if you're passionate about it,
And
right?
if you're
So
passionate.
exactly, right. Third is it's okay to slog if you're passionate about it. At that time, it does not count as slogging. It's just that you're doing something that you're passionate
It
about.
becomes more like a hobby rather than
Yeah,
you're actually doing
yeah.
work.
On the other hand, if you're sitting at 11 p.m. And saying, you know what, I'm going to solve this additional ticket, I'm going to add this new feature, that to me is useless.
How many bugs you have solved?
Exactly, right? That to me is useless because it does not tick any of the three boxes I talked about, and it does
True.
not give you satisfaction. It only drains you when you go back to sleep, right? So
That makes sense.
yeah.
Well, I can totally relate to it. I think it reminded me of an incident like Yes Bank crisis happened a couple of years back, right? And I remember I was working for a fintech startup at that time, and I remember a lot of team members just returning midway to their home to know and handle the crisis situation that was there on the table.
Yep.
And everyone came in because they owned the situation and the
Yep.
product,
Yep.
and it was not mandated, no, you have to slog for X hours and stuff like that, and that made a difference in how people commit to it
Yeah.
rather than just spending or clocking the hours on
Yeah.
the system. Makes sense. That's great. Well, to our audience, right, before we get into on how things are done, what does it mean for you, as what does developer productivity means for you in general?
Right. So I think it's something I always pondered throughout my life, right? Because again, to create impact, you need to ensure that you got the right wheels in motion. I think few decades back, productivity was all about. It was pretty mechanized, right? So you had a well-defined set of things to do. I'm not talking about engineering, but let's talk about a factory line setup, right?
Okay.
You got a well-defined set of things to do. You just need to go and repeatedly do that. You need to ensure you don't like do any major mistakes, right?
Yeah.
You don't need to think too much. You do repetitive things, right? And how good are you at doing them without causing major quality defects, right? So that's how productivity was before. But I think programming, developing, releasing software, right? Creating outsized impact through software, right? Through the things that you build, needs this healthy dose of creativity, craftsmanship, right? And also in some areas you need to be tight. There is no need to reinvent the wheel, right? So I think it's a mixture of all of these things. So to me, it is not about how much activity you perform, it is how much outcomes you bring to the table, right?
That's a
That to me
great
is my
perspective.
definition of productivity, right?
That's a great perspective. So, what I'm getting from this point is that earlier, how productivity was measured was for a different system altogether, but we tried to get that same working into developers, which is not the right way to do it.
So when someone comes and tells me, hey, you know what, every team needs to tell how much lines of code their engineers coded, right? I'm like, that's horrible, man. Don't do that, right? So
Okay.
I mean, you're looking at activity based measurement instead of outcome based measurement.
Or how many Jira tickets have you closed in a day?
Exactly. It doesn't talk about right, what's the outcome that you've
Well,
created.
that's a fun part, because one thing that happened during very early stages of my career is that even for turning on a virtual machine, there was a ticket that needs to be logged, and that was like driving me crazy, dude. It's a 2 minute task, and I have to spend 10 minutes just to log a ticket for it.
Yep.
But that's how system used to work, and that's how we used to build the customers and stuff like that. So yeah, I think, how do you think now? Is it changing in the current trends, or is
I
it
think
the same?
I
What's
think-
going on?
I think people are still trying to figure it out. See, again, there is no clear metric for creative output.
Okay.
Right. It is still a tough problem, in my opinion. I think a bunch of companies have tried to do things around that, right? But I look at them more as windshields that you look out of just to know that you're not heading down a cliff, you're staying on the road, right?
Okay.
Rather than a very accurate measurement of saying that, you know what, I can compare this with another team and say which one is better,
Yeah.
right?
Because the road can be a highway or a mountain
Yeah,
terrain as well.
exactly, right? So,
Sounds good. So, in that aspect, right? How do organize, because the organizations are spending a lot on the engineering organizations, right? The engineers that are being paid for it. But how do, as leaders or engineers, as an organization, how do I measure that whether the amount of investment that we have made is going to the right direction or not? What's your take to it?
got it. So, there are a couple of interesting things you can do. I think it's a
Okay.
great question because that's one of the questions that everyone has about an engineering team, right? You know what? Engineers are typically paid disproportionately to the rest of the organization, right? And why does this need to happen, right? What value are you guys bringing in, right? And how do you measure that value continuously?
True.
Right, and how do you show that to the board, right, or to leadership, right? I think that's a classic question that's probably been around since the beginning of software development, right? So now there are a couple of ways to look at it. Eventually, if your team is doing the right thing, the business outcome is going to come.
Okay.
Okay, so that is your final true measurement of whether the team that you hired is actually bringing in value, right? But in a lot of cases, it takes many quarters or years for the business outcome to come,
Okay.
right? Then it becomes a question of how do I know I'm on track?
Yeah.
How do I know I'm doing it fast enough? How do I know I'm doing it right? This is what any business wants to answer, right?
True.
So now to know that you are on track and you're continuously in the right direction, there are a few things you can do, right? How quickly, I think you have Dora metrics, you have the space framework, there are a bunch of things that are out there, right? These kind of give you directional insights on whether your team is heading down the right way, right? But again, looking at absolute numbers there and comparing them, to me, it still sounds a bit iffy. But you can use things like deployment frequency, change failure rate to know whether your team is is doing reasonably. Again, I look at it as a windshield rather than a speedometer, right? So, yeah, the numbers are fine, but to me, they give directional visibility over
They just tell you
accurate.
that things are going in the right direction, but they didn't tell you that this is the right way to measure it, or
Yeah, the numbers don't really mean much, right? I mean, the numbers, absolute numbers don't mean much there, right? Relative numbers across teams can probably help me compare teams to a reasonable extent. But there again, there's a lot of context missing. The problem in all of these is that context is missing, right? So I think a different way to kind of rethink this, right, which I've been thinking of in recent quarters and years, is that
okay,
can we reframe our goals to deliver incremental value every month or every quarter, right? Once you start reframing, actually, at the end of the day, it's a feedback loop, right? Once you and business impact is the final catch-all measurement,
I
right?
agree.
So why wait till like the entire year is done to measure business impact? Can you figure out a recurring mechanism to measure business impact, and can you figure out the right chunks of iteration so that I can incrementally deliver business impact, right?
So, how do you do that in your day to day life? As in, how do you measure the developer productivity at your organization right now? How effective it is? What are your learnings, the key learnings from the things that you're doing, and that you would like to share?
Yeah. So let's break this down from first principles. I think it's
Okay.
important to get the mental model here right, right? So we said that we want to measure business impact. I mean, that's the catch-all measurement, right?
True.
And while we are heading towards that catch-all end state, you need something called velocity, right? And if you break down velocity, it has two components. It has distance. I mean, it has speed and direction, right? So both
Reminded
play
me
an
of 11th
yeah,
standard
exactly, right?
physics out
So
there.
so funnily enough, man, these first principles are like applicable for any field that you take, right? Because it's so fundamental, right? So again, if you go back to that, it's pretty evident. If you overlay what's happening, if you overlay velocity onto whatever you're doing on the ground, right? Two things affect whether you reach your end goal: speed and direction, right? So if your direction is off, you need to course correct at some point, and that's going to affect how you're going to reach the end goal, right? If your direction is right and your speed is not fast enough, right, then it's going to take a long time, even though you're heading in the right direction, right? So I think a lot of times we focus on speed. When we look at things like change failure rate, deployment frequency, and all of that stuff, we don't focus on direction, right?
Okay.
So what does direction really mean? In my view, it is like razor sharp clarity on what we want to deliver, right? And a lot of times what we want to deliver is not clear because you have like business saying X gets translated to X dash by product managers, gets translated to X double dash by engineers, gets translated to X triple dash when you're actually like coding. I can keep going. Okay, I can keep going.
This
Right. So,
reminds of a meme that usually happens with team building exercises
yeah,
and
right. They
stuff.
tell you to write on backs and all of that, right? So, I mean, I think it's true. It's true, right? So, by the time, like, and then when you go for reviewing these things, the actual reason might have been something else.
Yeah.
The reason, whatever you're doing on the ground is something else, right? And the forces you're trying to optimize for, right? The outcome that you're trying to optimize for might be totally different, right? So, what this does, how this affects velocity is if you do not understand the end to end context of why you're doing something and what you need to do and what outcome it is going to drive, you cannot make trade offs. Right? See, engineering at the end of the day is all about trade offs. You cannot build a perfect system, or it is very unlikely you can build a perfect system given the cost and time constraints that you have. If you had infinite time and infinite money, you can probably go do that, right?
Yeah.
So it's all about trade-offs. And if you do not know what levers you have to adjust, you cannot make the right trade-offs.
Yeah.
And that typically comes back and bites you within 6 months or 3 months or just before you're about to launch. And there you lost your direction equivalent, right?
Yeah,
So
I think this is similar to we had a similar like we have a podcast a couple of months back where we talked about that it's not always necessary to have 4 nines of availability for a software, right?
yeah,
It could be it's fine to have a 95 percentile or
yeah,
99
yeah.
percentile availability if it makes sense for the business. So it's kind of relates to
Yeah,
what you
yeah.
are trying to say as well. Makes sense.
See, the best system to build is a system you don't build, right?
Wow.
So, like, can I just avoid the problem in the first place, right? Do you need a complex system to do something like this? Can you simplify it, right? Can I solve 99% of the problem through a system and handle 1% operationally? Is my scale 3 years down the line? Maybe 3 years down the line is when I really need to address that 1%, right? So, these are all questions that you want to ask to ensure that directionally you're doing the right thing and you're able to make the right trade offs. So,
That's definitely a great perspective. This definitely will improve a lot of stuff on how you where you invest and what to invest at the time right now, rather than thinking about 5 years down the line on what is going to happen. Sounds good. One another point to that comes in, right, is that an engineering team is not always consistent in terms of years of experience a person brings in or what is the background that the person is coming from, and things like that, right? So there could be a very junior engineer who's just out of college, a freshman, and then there could be a person who's 10 years in the industry. So based on that, the productivity will definitely be different, uh, if that is a factor. How do you measure those kinds of things? Because it becomes even harder and complex to address those parts. Love to know your opinion on that.
So I think it's a function of what input you feed into the system, right?
Uh-huh.
Most companies, right, today have these role guidelines
Okay.
where they say that, hey, for an SD1,
Yeah.
you have a well-defined task that you can go and execute, right? SD2, you have a slightly more ambiguous task. SD3, maybe you get a cut of a business problem, and as you grow up, you probably hey. Your JD becomes like, you know what, there will be these sentences that executives will make, and you have to translate that into systems, right?
Yeah.
So I think that is how you manage it, right? So that's where the way you measure productivity for a team depends a lot on how you break down tasks across the team. As an individual, you can still say that, you know what, I'm creating this impact, I'm moving this metric, I'm moving this system, but also what direction do I get? What is the granularity of the task that I get? So I think it's very important for the senior engineers on the team to break down things to a point where the engineer, a junior engineer or a senior engineer or even a more senior engineer can operate, right? So I think that is the beauty of having a well cohesive unit of folks working together who understand that there are these different people who can work at different levels, and a bunch of folks in the team know how to break down things.
Yeah.
So that different people can pick up these different granularities of tasks, right? So the productivity metric still stays the same. what business metric am I still moving? Yeah.
Well, this kind of, I want to break a notion that generally comes in, especially with at different stages of a career. You feel that I'm the one who's doing most of the code. This
Right.
guy is just writing some design documents
Right. Right.
and stuff. But
So
this kind of
exactly.
changes things for
So
you.
that is where I think productivity is very different. The definition of productivity is different for an SD1 versus an SD2. I mean, you are moving metric, but how you move that metric becomes different, right?
Yeah.
So as an SD1, you are given a task, you write code, you deploy, right? As an SD, see again, my take is every engineer should write code. Otherwise, you're not an engineer. Okay, so I have a very strong opinion there. People can crib about this, but if you don't write code, you're not an engineer, right?
True.
So you can't say I'm a fellow, I'm a principal engineer, so I will not write code. I think that's horrible, right? Otherwise, you never stay connected to details, right? So having said that, right? So the way an SD1 moves the metric is different from the way an SD2 moves the metric, right? The SD2, for example, does things that enable two SD1s to move the metric and also enables themselves to move the metric. An SD3 probably does things that enables multiple SD2s to move the metric and also themselves to move the metric. And as you go, right, every layer you go above, it is about people ensuring that the others, their peers, right, or their juniors are able to move the metrics. How can I break things down? How do I give clarity of vision and razor sharp focus in direction and enable them with the right tools to ensure that they're actually moving in that direction, right? So as you keep growing up, your ambiguity increases, but also the output that comes from each layer above you is clarity. If this does not happen properly, then the team is not a well-oiled machine, right? So even though you might have 2-3 rock stars, the team itself may not be delivering much. So that's typically the way I've seen this happen, manifest in very many different avatars. But
Okay.
it's always some variation of this. Right?
True.
So,
Well, I'm bringing to another controversial topic on this part now. So there's another notion that comes in that how does an engineering manager fits into this picture on the productivity side of it, right? Because at times there's notion again that I do all the work, he takes the credit. What goes off for you?
absolutely. So I was a manager for a year, and my
Did
team.
you move back because your manager took like your manager took the credit?
No, I think so. If you guys are watching, I had a pretty awesome team with me. I think it was way back in 2015. Oh no, sorry, 2013. Sorry, I don't remember. It's been quite a
Okay.
long time. So I was a manager for a year. So I think the manager acts the glue in the team, right? Also ensures that the various parts are working together well, right? I think of them as the control unit in a way, right? So you can always say that what does the control unit in the car do? It's the wheels that are turning, right? Or it's the engine that's giving the power, right?
Yeah.
So, but you need someone to coordinate, right? Ensure that the cohesion happens, right? The coordination happens across these teams. The vision is correct. We are staying on track, right? To me, that is the value an engineering manager brings. And I would love if managers code. I've been pushing a lot of managers to write code. I think
You're
if you're
making their life miserable.
yeah, I think a few of my friends who are listening to this will probably still be cursing me, but but I believe you have to stay connected to details, right?
True.
Yeah, so I think that's the value an engineering manager brings in, and also along the lines, right? How do you set up mentorship for the engineers, right? See, I think for the team to stay cohesive, cohesiveness does emerge in some cases, but you also need a controlling force which kind of ensures that the cohesiveness comes out, and that's where the engineering manager kind of comes into the picture, in my opinion. So
Nice perspective. Well, to this point that we just saying, right, of making a controller and have something moving on to the picture, this one thought that also comes in is how do you ensure that you are making things to the right levels? Like what should be the right team size for that example, right? How important is it, or what's your opinion on what should be an ideal team size, the compositions, anything, and does it affect the overall developer productivity that we are talking about?
got it. No, I think it does. See, think again, standard theory and in practice as well, right? See, the more components and more coordination you have,
Okay.
right? You end up with bottlenecks, right? So more coordination, more bottlenecks, right? So purely from that perspective, again, zero coordination means no cohesion, right? So there is a so there's a trade-off to be made,
Yeah.
right? Again, I think that's life, right? It's all about trade-offs. So generally, my personal take is teams of 3 to 4 engineers, right? Again, it all depends on how you break down a problem, right? So there's a fractal relationship in all of this,
Yeah.
and you can kind of feel a common theme, right? It all depends on how you break down the problem, right? If you can break down the problem into good enough chunks that pods of 3 to 4 or squads of 3 to 4 engineers can move fast, right? I think that's the ideal unit, in my opinion, where the coordination overhead does not kind of eat into your day-to-day work,
Got it.
right? And you have enough cohesion to kind of move together as one unit.
Yeah, I think this is something similar that even at Mercari, what we are doing. We have a concept of cohorts within the platform engineering space, where the entire team is a good bunch of people, but for specific projects, we have cohorts that
Yeah.
take the entire set of decisions for that particular
Yeah,
project.
yeah, yeah.
So it kind of reduces the friction and the time to get approvals and all
Yeah,
that stuff
yeah,
on top of
yeah.
it. That does not mean we compromise on engineering principles, but that's how you make things faster.
Absolutely,
In
absolutely.
my opinion. Yeah.
So I think it's a mixture of empowerment and also I think one of your managers told me this long back. I think it's an Amazon principle, right? I mean, not a leadership principle, but it's a very commonly used technique, right? Trust but verify, right? So
Yeah.
empowerment also needs to have the right verification mechanisms in place to ensure that things don't deviate too much, or if they do, you catch them early enough and get it back on track, right? So those are all control mechanisms that a manager can probably set up in the team, right? To ensure that while these cohorts are empowered, how do you ensure that they are on the right track and taking the right decisions, right? So you need periodic reviews to ensure that these things kind of stay on track and there is consistency in quality across all your cohorts.
So that brings me to another point, right? So uh, we talked about what should be done, what should not be done, and all this stuff. But how do we do it? Like, what are the tools? What are some of the weapons that people have in an organization to actually not only measure productivity but improve productivity for that matter? What do you think?
Got it. So I think we need. So I think it depends on how businesses set up metrics and ways to measure it, right? Again, I'll talk about business metrics and I'll come back to how do you do at teams, right? See, for example, I remember one particular team, a sister team in a company I worked at, where they spent 6 months building mechanisms just to measure the metric, right? And after that, once they had the number, their next year's goal was like reduce this metric by X%.
Correct.
The year after that was like reduce this metric by Y%, right? So a lot of times I can't overemphasize the impact that having a proper measurement mechanism can bring onto the table, right? So maybe that's what you need to start doing first, right? Ensure that you have a way to measure automatically and reliably and consistently and use that to drive a lot of decisions, right? Having said that, coming back to a team, right? You want to probably look at again a feature that I'm releasing right now, right? How much impact is it creating, right? And what is the complexity of the feature, right? And see, it's a very tricky one. There are a few things which I've seen being done in the past, right? I've not seen one size fits all. You have the team agree on what complexity is, right?
Correct.
And which means how does complexity manifest itself? It could be in terms of ambiguity in requirements. It could be that the requirement is clear, but to actually solve something, it requires like a complex algorithm, for example, to go solve it, right?
And
Third,
complexity is also a relative term, right? What might be complex for you might not be complex for someone else.
Yep, exactly, right. So I think then complexity could also be because of coordination that you need to do across
Yeah.
teams, right? Or consensus that you need to drive across different teams, right?
Correct.
So all of these manifest in different ways, or you could also think of them as complexity as friction, right? And friction happens in all these different ways, right? So as long as the team agrees on a definition of what that friction or complexity is, right? And if someone is able to finish or overcome that in an allocated amount of time that the team feels comfortable with, right? I think we are good, right? So it's more of a community activity rather than a well-defined scientific activity. That's what I would say, right? And how do you compare now two teams? Let's say you give the same problem to two teams, right? That becomes another interesting challenge, right? While in isolation, you know that this team has arrived at a solution. How do you improve the team itself, right? How do you know that the team could have probably done better? Maybe there is a bias in the team itself saying where they're overestimating complexity, right?
Yeah.
So how do you deal with those kinds of things? So I think that is where, again, I say it's a community activity where you again branch out, get folks from multiple teams periodically meeting together, talking about these things, right? And then things kind of normalize over time, right? So um, I know it's a very different answer than what you'd probably hear or read about, right?
Yeah.
But I don't for acts of creativity, right? Or for acts, I mean, for things where craftsmanship like this is required, right? I think it is really a community activity where instead of looking at it as pure hard numbers, where context is missing. Again, you can use numbers as a windshield, not as a speedometer,
Yeah.
right? While you do that, then maybe if something is egregious, maybe the numbers kind of help you figure that out. But small differences in numbers, I don't think really mean anything, right? And that's where sitting together as a group across teams, and again, see. This also brings in another layer of coordination. So it's a chicken and egg
Okay.
problem.
Yeah.
But again, the point is this worth doing so that it improves? When I go back, it improves me or what my team is doing. I think it is worth doing things like this. So,
That's one point that I would actually want to stress at is one thing that you mentioned is one of the system teams developed something to measure the overall system, right? So can you elaborate on some of the tools that people can use who are watching this episode, especially what tools they can use to measure productivity? Obviously, they might not have the bandwidth and the people to develop something for their use cases specifically. But any tools that you would recommend to start measuring it so that they can work on improvements? Anything that you can do?
got it. So if you look at feature velocity, right?
Okay.
So I think the fun part here is you probably don't need to go do and something drastically different. You're all probably using these tools in your daily life already. I think Jira gives you burn down charts, right?
Okay.
GitHub tasks again gives you these things. Azure DevOps gives you points. You can look at burn down charts. You can look at the velocity at which you're delivering features. You can look at your ticket rates to ensure that you're delivering things at a particular quality, right? So I think standard tools is what you use to actually ensure that you are able to measure what you're delivering in terms of activity. Again, here important thing to note is we are only measuring activity. We are
Okay.
not measuring outcomes, right?
Yeah.
All these tools help you measure activity.
Yeah.
To really measure outcomes, it depends on what tool you are using in production to measure business outcomes, right? For example, it might mean that you want to increase your order rate,
Okay.
right? So if you will have some tools to measure your order rate, you will have a graph, right? So can I show a clear causation pattern saying that this particular change actually increased by order rate by so much,
Okay.
right? So there you get into A/B tests and experiments and like bandit approaches and all of that stuff, right? So typically, I've seen different companies use different tools to measure these things based on what the business metric is, right? I think that is where we need to mix both the activity metric and the business metric, right? So yeah, the business metric tools are varied. At least that's what
Yeah.
I've seen, right? So I don't have a great recommendation there, but I think it could be as simple as periodically trawling your database and maybe publishing a bunch of metrics to Grafana or CloudWatch or whatever, right? It could be Tableau dashboards that you build for your business, right? It could be as simple as that, right? So I think the take is there is no roadblock to getting this metric out. There is no technical or tool roadblock in getting these
Got
things
it.
out. It's typically a mental roadblock or lack of awareness, right? I think that's what we have to address.
I think this kind of relates to one of the big book that I was reading about OKRs, and how do you define a key result, and how accurately do you define it will make ensure that you are moving in the right direction. So, for example, the key result has to be measurable.
Yep.
You cannot have a key result which is not measurable.
Yep.
Your objective can be ambiguous, but your key result has to be measurable.
Yep.
That's only when you'll get to know that you're moving in the right direction.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Okay, that kind of makes great sense on how do you measure things off. So that means you don't have to instrument something very heavy and complex to start measuring engineering productivity inside your organization. It's the regular stuff that you usually
Yep.
do.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's great. Okay, so now we know why it is important. We know how do you measure it. We'll like to get your insights on how do you help in improving developer productivity in your organizations, because we know where are we at, but how do you improve it?
Yeah, yeah, got it. So I think it's again a mixture of both.
Okay.
ensuring that you have the right tools, mechanisms, and processes in place to measure business outcomes. I emphasize that a lot, right? Because it's very easy to get lost in some cool technical problem you're solving, which is actually awesome, right? You
Yeah.
learn a lot, but like a month later, you have like people hounding you saying that, yeah, this is all cool, man, but nothing happened to me, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's no money in the books, right? So what are you guys up to, right? The second piece is you also need the right tools, right? I mean, like let's say we need to go from here to Seattle, from Bangalore to Seattle. If you are given a cycle, it's gonna take a few months, right? So I think it's also important for organizations to realize that you need to provide engineers with the right tools for them to make progress, right, and deliver disproportionate value. So I think for me, this started off as a bunch of shell scripts back at Amazon. Right, I was a big fan of ensuring that I have all the necessary tools in place so that I can focus on the work at hand and my distractions are reduced. Right. For example, a good example of a distraction is let's say I want to slice and dice and do a git bisect to figure out like where some bug got introduced. Right.
Yeah.
And obviously, I don't know these commands
And
by
do a
heart.
git blame on it.
Right? I don't know these commands. I will have to go do Stack Overflow, right?
Yeah.
Search, come back, right? Now, over time, you build up probably patterns and aliases and a bunch of things.
True.
By the way, if you should check out Warp Terminal,
Okay.
you can actually give like natural language commands, and that guy translates it to like actual commands, and it's pretty awesome, by the way, right? So I use it a lot for my personal work. So yeah, so things like these, right? Now I have like spent like maybe like 20% of what I would actually do, right? So this is what I mean by when I said that tools can give you like a huge boost on how you actually get this done. The second thing is percolating patterns and practices across the team, right?
Okay.
So I think I still remember this. I think the first time I wrote some code in Amazon to write to DynamoDB and push a guaranteed message, right? It took me like a long time to take a notebook, work out how a distributed transaction works, what are all the different failure modes, how do I actually manage retries, how do I ensure liveness, right? How do I deal with dangling data? What happens if the client does not retry? Can I live with it, right?
Yeah.
It took a lot of
What
time
happens
to
if dies in between?
exactly your process dies, your host dies. What are all the different failure modes, right? So it took a lot of time to work this out on paper, right? Then 1 month later, I was solving a similar problem, right? It took half the time.
Correct.
Today, I can probably tell you, like, okay, hey, what do you do here? I can probably, hey, this is what you need to do, right? So so this is also an increase in productivity if you look at it, right?
Correct.
So how does this happen, right? So my advice to folks is you have to consciously look at building a pattern repository in your head, right? Where you, when you work out these things, you generalize them, right? So let's say it takes half an hour, or like let's say it takes half a day for you to solve the problem, right? You now spend an additional half an hour adding more constraints, removing constraints, working out different variations of it, and derive patterns out of it and store it in your head. You can write it down also. It's a great reference for your team to scale, right? So once you start doing this repetitively, over time, you end up with hundreds of these patterns in your head,
Yeah.
right? And then you start becoming faster at solving things. So
Correct.
here I'm not just talking about like actual tools, like I don't know, like GitHub Copilot or Augment Code, right? These are also mechanisms and tools that you have as a person, right, to actually improve productivity exponentially over time, right? And context switching is the other big hindrance to productivity, right? And this is also another interesting thing, right? I've had folks, I've seen, so I think when I was in SD1 or 2, I used to see these principal engineers and like, okay, this guy is like talking about supply chain systems in one meeting, offer systems in another meeting, HR systems in another meeting, payment systems in another meeting. How are they even able to like do this? So, see, the important point is going to the meetings, sitting and observing them is easy, right?
Yeah.
Giving actionable insights, valuable insights is the hard piece.
It's
And these guys
very
are
hard.
actually doing that, right?
Yeah.
I think that's what I meant, right? So as you grow, you drive value in different ways, right? Maybe early in your career, see, context switching is always the enemy of productivity, but it is inevitable. I think the industry is set up that way because as you grow, senior engineers are expected to work at org level problems, company level problems.
And they're expected to reply to any thread going on in the stuff, right?
Exactly, right?
That, hey, can you look at for 5 minutes? And that never is 5 minutes.
Exactly, right?
Truly.
Exactly, right? So you again see how do we solve it in computers? We have a checkpointing mechanism, right?
Okay, we are
So-
going to CPU scheduling now.
Exactly, right? So, but it works in
Oh,
real
wow.
life, right? So you need to checkpoint, right? So when something is really, you need a checkpointing mechanism. You have an L1, L2 cache,
Yeah.
right? So the equivalent of an L1, L2 cache for me is the pattern repository, right? And then you need to context switch efficiently, right? So I think you get better at it over time. I mentored a lot of folks who keep asking the same question,
Yeah.
right? What happens when I grow, and how do you guys manage to like go into different meetings, different contexts, and still provide valuable insights, right? So it happens when you actively work on it. You have a pattern repository that also acts like a checkpoint. You can bring it back up.
I think with pattern repository, one thing that I usually suggest a lot of my people who come and ask me, right, on how do I learn and all that stuff, is that if you're going through any code labs or any tutorial, just don't copy paste the commands and say, "Yay, it worked,"
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But actually ask the questions.
Yeah.
Hey, this worked. What if I change this value?
Yeah, yeah.
What if I increase the replica counts? What happens if I do this? What happens if I remove authentication and stuff? So that kind of gives you and makes the pattern repository that you're making.
But I'll tell you a challenge there. See,
Okay.
while all this gyan is great to give, right? There are practical challenges on the ground. You have a deadline approaching.
Deadline, yeah.
Okay, you have a deadline approaching. There are probably 50 other problems I'm going to run into after I fix this, right? Now do I go build up my pattern repository? What do I do, right? So this is something I struggled with a lot, right? I want to know about this. It sounds cool. So what do I do, right?
Yeah.
So one technique I've kind of started. I've been using for a long time is. Let me maybe give a specific example.
Okay.
I think when I first looked at the Guava cache, right, the loading cache, right. So
Yeah.
I had to solve a specific problem. There was a deadline, right. So I think it's all being smart about how you time box things, right, and how you get into these intense periods of concentration, right. So I figured out that the Guava loading cache works for my use case, and it was the first time I think I came across Google Guava, right.
Okay.
It looked awesome. Now, like one side, my hand is itching, saying that I need to finish this, right. The other side, my brain is saying like, okay, maybe you should just go look at this. It looks so
Yeah.
cool, right. So what I do in those cases is I do what I call the skimming approach. I like time box 2 minutes, 3 minutes, quickly skim through the documentation, which gives me like a broad view of what that system or library is trying to solve.
Yeah.
And it goes into my head, right? Then 2 months later, when I have a similar problem, I can just go on like immediately, okay, you know what? I remember reading this. Let me go take a look at it, right?
Yeah. Well, to our audience, while it's very easy listening to this part, it's actually very tough when you're trying to implement it and trying to get it. So don't get disheartened or discouraged when you're not able to do it in the first go. It takes months and months to get used to it and to master this art.
Exactly,
It's definitely an art.
Absolutely,
that's over there.
absolutely. I think that's the other thing I would tell folks, right? It is a journey, right?
Yeah.
Don't compare a fledgling plant with a grown-up oak tree, right? So, right. So it's
That's a
definitely
great
a
example.
journey, and I think it is important for maybe senior engineers to also be vulnerable in front of your junior engineers and tell that, you know what, these are all the times I screwed up before I actually came to this place where I'm able to do better at these things, right? So it is a journey. It takes time. It takes practice. It takes conscious effort, right? And you put it's like any craft. That's the way I look at it, right?
Yeah.
I think there is some study, right, says that you have to spend 10,000 hours at something before you're great at it.
True.
You probably don't need to spend 10,000 hours, but you start putting the effort and putting a conscious effort and framework in doing these things, and then results start showing.
I think for senior engineers, it's equally important to share failure stories,
Yeah,
as you
absolutely.
mentioned. So one of the instances that I always share is whenever I'm asked that how are you doing this thing and all this stuff along with your engineering things, is that there were times that I kind of screwed a lot. I deleted a DNS of prod database.
Oh, nice.
Which was
Okay.
a nightmare of a situation. But that situation actually taught me a lot. So, but this you will fail at times.
absolutely,
But
absolutely.
how you cope up and learn from the situation matters a lot.
Yeah,
And that will definitely improve on how you behave the next time similar situation comes.
Absolutely. I think that bleeds into productivity as well, very interestingly, right? The psychological safety that you have within your team, right? Where the team has the ability to experiment,
Yeah.
go fast, right, and potentially fail without fear of failure, right? That is actually a productivity booster, very interestingly, right?
Okay.
Because it gives you that exhilarating freedom to go fast, right? And the trust that you have someone who will catch you, which is the team. If you, I mean, who will catch you if you fall down, right? So,
Correct.
psychological safety. So, I think it's great that you mentioned this, right? I'm sure that you would have had a process. I mean, when you did the RCA for this
Yeah.
or the 5 Ys, the focus would have been on the process rather than the person, right? So, I think that manifests back into your productivity part
Yeah.
counterintuitively, because when you do these things, then people are more careful. People also feel happy in the team, and a happy team is a productive team,
Yeah.
right? I think that's also another important part of the productivity part.
Yeah, I think this is something that we briefly discussed in one of our other podcasts with Vishal from Google, where we talked about Google's brainless culture, and it's the system failure and not
Yeah,
a person's fault.
yeah,
So I think this kind of came in very great on how developer productivity also impacted because of that.
yeah,
So one more thing that a lot of our engineers, when I talk to, especially junior engineers, when I talk to them, is comes to their head is that people measured productivity because it may be used against them in
yep,
things like calibrations
yep,
or reviews and stuff
yep,
like that,
yep.
right?
So
And what's your approach to that?
I agree. It is used. It
Okay.
ends up being used
Okay.
inadvertently, right? So that's always been my crib about measuring activity, right? I think poker players know this, right? The you can only control the decision, not the outcome,
Yeah.
right? How do you reward high quality decisions,
True.
right? So it's important to reward high quality decisions,
Yeah.
even if the outcomes don't match, right? So I think the value rating kind of acts like that, a mechanism to do that,
Yeah.
right? But the other thing I've been thinking about recently, right, is how do you? So I remember this. I read this in a Siemens mousepad in
Okay.
2010, and it has stuck with me forever, right? It kind of drives who I am as a person as well. We think, function, succeed, and fail as a team, right? So this was in 2010. It was on a mousepad when I was in Siemens, right?
Okay. So you
About how
can
a team.
grab information even from a mouse pad.
Yeah, right.
That's the quality of a high engineer, though.
So this was like really awesome, right? Because at the end of the day, as an individual, there is only so much you can achieve. What you want to do is, again, right? How do you be a force multiplier? How do you ensure that the sum of the parts, right, is more than the whole,
Yeah.
right? So I think it's important to uh, ensure that team performance also factors into your appraisal,
Okay.
right? For example, if you, again, this is controversial, I've not seen this implemented,
I love
right?
controversies.
So maybe saying that, okay, let's say you have a bonus, right? Maybe 30% of bonus is based on your team's performance. And how is your team's performance decided? Based on what business metric you have moved, right? Now you're actually incentivized to collaborate within your team. You don't have competition saying that, you know what,
Yeah.
if I help that guy, he's going to go ahead of me, right? But these are things that people think. I've heard people say these things to me, right? So I think,
I can't agree more. I've heard this a lot of times.
right? So if I do this activity, this not does not help my promotion. I'm like, what? Just do it, man. It's for the team, right? So I think we have to rethink our incentive structures, right? To reward uh, velocity, to reward high quality decisions, and to reward collaboration. And this has to start from the team, the R, and the company. I think the team part typically gets missed out, is what my take is, right? At least for engineering companies, I've not seen team level performance baked into your performance bonus, right? So maybe that's something interesting which we should look for, or at least I'm going to try and push in the coming years. So
Wow, that's a brilliant perspective. Well, this is something that I can relate to as well, where a lot of people says that it's not my job, or it's
exactly,
why do I help it, or talking about incentives. There's this one common notion that I've been hearing while my discussions with engineers is I'm paid X amount and I'm doing the same job
yeah,
for that. इत्ते में इतना ही मिलेगा kind of
yeah,
thing,
yeah.
right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So what do you think on that perspective, and what do you want to give and share from your experience to people listening to this?
See, I don't blame folks for saying that, right?
Okay.
See, for some, what you do is your passion. For some, it's just another job, right? For some, it's an ends to some other mean. I mean, it's a means to some other ends, right? So different people do this for different reasons, right? And I think that's another thing I've realized as well, right? You can't expect everyone to be as passionate as you. You can't expect everyone to kind of hold the same high bar that you probably want to do, and you probably aren't being as passionate as someone else expects you to be, right? So it's like a, so I think the important thing is, again, we agree as a team what is the minimum or what is the output that we need to give, right? And if you have behaviors like these, in some context they may be right, in some context they may be wrong, right? And I think that is where it's a high judgment activity to
Okay.
figure out how do you maybe get people to demonstrate higher ownership. So maybe it's not a person problem, it's a team culture problem, right? Maybe we're not setting the right incentives there for folks to step up and say that, hey, let me do this so that I get something back in return, right?
Yeah.
And that reward could be team's performance, an individual congratulating you, right?
Yeah.
Or your team member congratulating you, right? So I think it all, I think it's very important to revisit the incentive structure for a team-based, a collaborative, creative activity.
Yeah.
I think we've been missing that, is what I feel, right? So
With this, I think one of the very basic thing is we have a bell in our office. So anyone if wants to, if I just like your work, or if you help me with something, right? I just go ahead, write a note for it, and ring that bell.
oh, nice.
So that entire office just claps.
Clap. Oh, nice. Very nice.
Of a nice thing. It's a very small thing, but if you're at the receiving end, right, you feel,
Yeah.
yeah,
Nice.
it's worth the effort.
Absolutely,
Right? So
absolutely.
it's small human touches that gets to it. Well, talking about human touches, what's your take on work from office, work from home? Does it impact productivity? There's a whole lot of hype.
Yeah,
In
yeah,
the
I agree. I agree. See, I've also had an evolving view on this.
Okay.
See, I think it depends. Uh, you need a certain level of maturity, and you need some frameworks already present for you to operate in a remote manner,
Okay.
right? So some people already have that framework ready, so they're able to
I
excel.
believe that framework was automatically created when COVID happened.
Huh, right?
But still, companies are getting it
No,
back.
some people
Yeah.
excel. See, again, it's a preference, right? Some
Makes
people
sense.
are able to adapt, or some people have that inbuilt, so they perform well. Some people are not able to, right? So maybe some folks require, or prefer in-person collaboration. Some folks probably don't want to see their colleagues and just talk and be done with it, right?
I don't want to see you anymore.
Exactly, right. I just want to get my work done, right?
Yeah.
So I think, again, it's a trade-off, as always in life, right? I think a hybrid mechanism is the best culture, right? Where people periodically can get together if they want to. The folks who want to meet others have the ability to do so.
Yeah.
The folks who don't want to are able to do so, right? I think even the Google study, right? The Project Aristotle study
Yeah.
found that this does not affect outcomes much, whether people are in office or whether they are working from home, right?
Yeah.
So
I think Project Aristotle was one of a great piece of studies. I would recommend personally as well to all our audience who is listening to this podcast. Please do go ahead and skim through that
yeah,
study.
it's a fun read.
It's a fun read. It's a great perspective.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of a situation. I am definitely going to say that there's a lot of things going on with this work from home and work from
Yeah,
office stuff.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I think I also agree that a hybrid culture is a great setting where you meet people face to face to get things done. And it's always easier when you have a personal connect with a person, right? So, for example, I know you personally, I can just go and message you about it and stuff. About it. Going ahead, right? Just your last takes about and suggestions to anyone listening to this podcast on if how important is it for a person to measure its own self productivity, how me as a person or individual can improve or work on getting improvements on the productivity because it matters. We have discussed about it. What's your last takes to it?
So I think consciously trying to get better at doing something. I think acknowledging is the first part of the problem. If you don't know there's a problem, then you're not going to actively work upon it. By chance, you might fix it, but yeah, you're not going to. I mean, there is the probability there is low. So first is figuring out whether you're happy with what you're doing and whether you feel you're driving the right outcomes, and whether the outcomes that you're driving aligns with the outcomes that the team wants to achieve, right? So I think that alignment is something that every engineer should be consciously doing and repetitively asking, right? For example, I had few of my principal engineers ask, Vijay, are we doing the right thing? Why are we doing this? What metric are we trying to use? And they will keep asking this, right? The answer might be the same. Sometimes it changes, and those are the important things those are the times when it's important, because that's when the alignment happens and any gaps get fixed, right? So it's important to first align the outcome that you're trying to achieve with what your team wants to achieve, and it's important for your team's outcomes to also be aligned with your leaders and orgs
Yeah.
outcomes, right? uh, this is something you should actively start doing literally from right now, right? The second piece is it's about craftsmanship, right? We have got the direction part fixed. The second piece is how do I get my speed high, right?
Okay.
So for that, use the right tools, build your own internal pattern repository, read a lot of code, talk to a lot of people, or at least listen to a lot of other people talking, right? Because you can't solve every problem in the world, right? See, it is pretty much like what you did in school, right? You would have some formulas, you'd want to try a different set of problems to actually apply those formulas, right? So now you can't go and solve all the problems in the world,
Yeah.
but the next best thing is you can read about how others solved different problems, or you can talk to other folks who have solved different problems, right? That gives you a lot of breadth. So go do that. There are a bunch of tools out there. The AI coding assistants are a force multiplier in your opinion. They may not be, I don't think they're a replacement yet, but they're definitely a huge force multiplier, right? So
Okay.
adopt them, work with your leads to push them to adopt things like that, right? And at the end of the day, I think be passionate about what you do. And Yeah, I think that's pretty much what I would say. Right. So
That's superb of an advice, Vijay. Well, thanks a lot for sharing all these gyans and all these great advices to our people who are watching this show. And I think these are invaluable pieces of advice that any person can get in on how do you improve yourself. And constant improvement is very necessary for
yeah,
any individual.
yeah.
So thanks a lot for taking out time and sharing your context and perspective with our audiences. Means a lot to us. Thanks a lot.
Thank
Yeah.
you, Vaibhav. It was great to be here. In closing, so I think I spoke at AWS Bangalore Summit a few weeks ago. And after that, a lot of my friends messaged me saying that you need to dress better. You need to buy a decent looking pair of shoes. So today morning, I woke up, thought hard about this, and made sure that they message me again and say that your AWS attire was better. So bring it on, guys.
Well,
But super awesome to be here. I loved it. I
thanks.
loved it.
Well, that's another note. It's not necessary that you have a pair of shoes that you wear to a podcast. Being a fellow engineer, it hardly matters. What matters is how well you articulate to situations and what you take few decisions, but that few decisions should be worthwhile your
Yep.
efforts and pays the whole lot of things for the organizations. Thanks a lot again for being there, and for all our audiences that is kind of listening to this podcast. I hope you have learned a lot. So do like, share, and subscribe our channel so that you don't miss any updates coming from the channel and you don't miss any episodes. Do let us know in the comment section as well that what else you want to see us talking about, who you want us to bring in to our podcast series. Have a nice day, take care, and see you soon. Thank you.